Hello and welcome back. So we have learned how to do our floral motifs and practice them. And now for the second part of the course, we're ready to dive into making a repeat pattern from them. But before I start on that, I just wanted to show you that I mentioned making greeting cards from these little motifs. And here's one that I put together really quickly. Just the little flower and leaves that we finished at the end of the last video. And I had a box of these blank cards that come with the envelopes. And I just very simply made a watercolor background, put a bunch of watercolor down, blotted some of it back up with a paper towel, let it dry. And then for this little image itself, I cut it out with some decorative scissors, which you can get fairly inexpensively through craft stores, and glued it onto the background. Oh, and also I put a little gold edge on that and on the card itself. For the gold, I used a Krylon 18 karat gold leafing pen. And for the glue, I just wanted to let you know about this PVA glue. It's by Lineco. It says it's ideal for bookbinding and paper projects, and it really is good for paper project. It doesn't, it sticks really fast, and it doesn't warp the paper. And for that, for the glue, I just put it directly on the back of this. I didn't put it on the background, just the back of this. Put it down, held it down, and it stuck pretty quickly. If you want to, you can put a sheet of wax paper over it in case any of the glue came out around the edges, and then put a book over it to let it dry. And the glue, if there is glue, should not adhere to that wax paper. So there's just a little tip about making some of these cards. Obviously, you could make quite a few pretty quickly, or it could be a fun project with you and some of your art friends. But now on to the repeat pattern, and as I think I've said before, there's no real need to use the motifs that we were working on. I just thought it would be nice to give you some motifs to use if you didn't have any already of your own. But whatever you have, whatever you want to do, is going to work. So I have a piece of watercolor paper here, and I've drawn a square. I've used it in the corner, or I've drawn it in the corner rather than in the center, because it's important to have this be as precise a square as you can get. So I wanted to give myself a good head start by beginning with a corner, at least one corner that I knew was a good 90-degree angle. So I chose a 7-inch square, and the other thing that I would want to do with this would be on each side, I'm going to measure halfway, which would be 3.5 inches. I'll put a little dot, and then I'll draw a short line perpendicular to that edge. So I have my square, I know where my midpoints are, and I know how to go into the midpoint perpendicular to the edge. So that's the beginning of it. You can use whatever size square you want. You could use a rectangle instead of a square, but for whatever reason, it just seems simpler to grasp the concept if we start with a square. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to, well actually first I'll tell you what I'm going to do. So I'm going to put motifs on this page, on this square, but I'm not going to have any of them touching an edge. And I'm just going to paint as the spirit moves me. Again, nothing touching the edge. You can leave a space between all the motifs, or you can have them overlapping. But the point is to fill the center of the square. Especially pay attention to the close to the center, that you have it the way you want it before we proceed to the next step. So I am going to stop talking and just start painting, and in the end I'll probably speed it up and voice over. But let's get on to painting the center of the design. Okay, so here we go, painting. I'm starting by loading my brush up. I'm going to paint a berry, like we did, outlining it, filling it in, the paint in it, using the paint that's on the paper to pull out the stem and the little things at the top, which I now think I know are the remnants of the stamens from the flower that produced the berry. Taking some paint back out, which you can do just by, while the paint is wet, just by blotting your brush um, so that it's fairly dry and touching it to the paint, it'll pick up the paint. That's one of the things I love about watercolor, how you can get so many effects by putting colors in, taking colors out while the paint is still damp. So there's our little cluster of berries, and now, whoops, tried to make a nice smooth line, but it didn't work, and I could take it out of there as long as I blotted it up, added water and blotted it up fairly quickly. So I'm going to make a fern. Now, someone who's better at or more patient with watercolor than I am would either know exactly how heavily to load the brush or would load the brush and then test it before going ahead and stroking on the paper, but I guess that's not me. So if I don't get enough paint on, I just go back over it. If I get too much, I pull it back out with the drier brush. And here I am dropping some blue into the inner corners of some of the leaflets on the fern. Fern's one of my favorite motifs. And now a berry branch. Strengthening the color in some parts, especially where on the main stem or where stems intersect meet with each other. And then I'm going to use the small brush and do the circle. So you see that I'm not doing the circle in one smooth stroke. I'm doing half and then a half. And that's because I generally want to be pulling the brush towards me rather than pushing it away from me. And of course, if you draw the full circle with your paper in one spot, you're going to end up pushing the brush away from you at some point, and then you're going to get a messy outcome. Um, Adding some leaves, like in the first video, I was very careful when I did these berries to only put the dot in the very center of the berry, but this time I'm not being so picky, and I'm letting the colors from the inside and the outside circle of the berry go into each other. And there you just saw me add a little bit of orange to that leaf on the berry branch, and you'll find that adding warm color to cool, or vice versa, gives a very interesting, complex kind of color, which can be really nice. So I didn't get as much paint on the brush as I would have liked to. Coming back, putting a little more in. It's wet, it's going to flow. Smoothing it around the center. And now for the buds. Brush for these. And a small round brush to put more paint around the edge. And then smoothing it into the petals with some clear water that will encourage that paint to run. I should say, I guess, to move. bulbed leaf. Turning my paper, constantly turning my paper so that I can be drawing the brush towards me. Going back and adding more color where I thought I needed it. And then back to those leaves on the berry branch. Darker than they were. And the more you go back and add more color, I guess only up to a certain point, but to a certain point, it gives the color more depth and more interest. Now I'm just adding little dots around the upper edge of those berries. We all have motifs that we really like to work with, and for me, one of those is dots. And now I'm adding more color to certain parts of the stems, particularly right below the berries. Single leaf, stem, taking some color out of the center. Some more single leaves with the flat brush, small S strokes, and these are paler, more pale than some of the other things I've done, and I think that a mix of pale and stronger is really good. And here we have touch and blob flowers. As I place these motifs, I don't particularly have any plan. I'm just looking at what's already there and deciding what would look good where. Striving for balance in value, which is light and dark, and color, and also the strength or weakness, I guess you could say, of the motif. So these little pale single leaves are very weak, whereas the big blue flower is very strong, and that dark berry is very strong as well. So I want to have a balance across the design of those different kinds of um, characteristics. Now that the fern is dry, I can come back with a liner brush and put the center vein in those leaflets, and it won't bleed because the paint is dry underneath it. Likewise with the flower, which I thought was too dark, and blotted it back up. Dry paint now, so that line is not bleeding, to stay in a crisp line. And it's too strong. Putting the little markings on the petals with the liner brush. Taking a minute to take a look and see what do I, well, of course I want to do the flexes on the buds, but also what else am I going to want to put in the center of this design? Of course, I'm not drawing anything ahead of time. I'm just starting somewhere, assessing what I have, deciding what I want to do next, doing it, and then starting the cycle all over again. Assessing what I have, deciding what I want to do next, doing it, and assessing. And here for the first time I'm overlapping some motifs. I'm putting some grass clusters over that berry branch. Seed heads. And one thing I really like about this motif is how when you put one line over the next, where it crosses, the paint's gonna move, which means you'll get a stronger color where the lines intersect. Single flowers, single leaves, sorry. These are nice filler motifs. Design would be, I think, very boring if all you had were the large bold leaves and the large bold flowers. The smaller motifs, I don't know, they add a sense of motion to it, I think. Especially with those stems that are curving around. Now, there's no right and no wrong. You just proceed in a way that pleases you. It didn't please me, it was too dark, so I simply blotted it up. And as well as having the cool, tiny elements of the single leaves, now we've got some warm, tiny elements with those little, I don't know what they are, maybe petals falling away. Circle of the center of the blue flower, and then running water around the outside of it to help it bleed a little bit, meaning blur the edges. And taking some paint back out of those berries for highlights. And you can do this, obviously, when the paint's dry. And in a sense, it's easier when the paint dries because it actually pulls out better and the remaining paint is not wet and so does not run into the area that you just removed the paint from. Now some small circles. That one you notice is pretty close to another motif, so we don't want, we don't want even spacing between these motifs. We want some closer and some further than others. Just running water around the outside of the circle to blur that outer edge. One of the fun things about this is you don't really know what you're going to end up with until the very end, when you've done all your painting, you can't do any more to it, and then you get to the repeat part and you can see what you have actually in its entirety. Just continuing to assess, fuss, change, remove, add, until I'm happy. By the way, this is not the last chance to work with this area, but we do want to get it mostly done at this point. The reason for that will become clear next time.